Okay, my name is Daniel Christodos, and I'm with the Southwest Water Company in Houston, Texas, but we have our systems all over Texas and one system in Oklahoma. Before I start this presentation, the title is pretty obvious. Let me ask a question. How many of us have bought a car without test driving it? I'm sure everyone would say, yes, we test drove it and bought it. But how many of us have bought a car after stress driving it? You know, test driving it and stress driving it is a totally different thing. Stress driving it is going through those bumps, going through those potholes, going up the bridge, slamming the brakes, make sure it's safe, there's no one behind you, and testing it in conditions that you would normally be using it. I bought a car once and I was pretty disappointed because I had to start speeding up as soon as I saw the hill, and I lived in Tennessee for 11 years. 2011 implementation of a high-tech automatic water meter reading application in unprecedented record time at diversified water utilities across Texas. This paper is going to focus on three keywords in this title: implementation, application, and the diversification. Our utilities are extremely diversified across the right half of Texas. Our existing process wasn't working. There were numerous hazards to the meter reader. The manual meter reading process had numerous drawbacks. We wanted to transition to secure, remotely acquired, automatic meter consumption data. There were extensive benefits with having an automated meter reading project. So we outlined our wish list. We evaluated the universe of technologies. We named our objective, and there was only one technology that fitted with that objective, so we implemented that technology and created project analytics to track it from the beginning. We have 106 water plants, most of them groundwater, near major cities in 33 counties, different terrains, prairies and lakes, piney woods, Gulf Coast, South Texas plains, and hill country. Here's a map of our systems across the right half of Texas. Those dots that you see on the map, the red, the blue, and the black, represent our water and wastewater systems across Texas. We spend about $1 million on the annual water meter reading. We have numerous vehicles, lots of operators, 3.5 billion gallons of water. And there are challenges, hills and valleys. Sometimes we drive 100 miles just to collect the consumption reading manually from a few water meters. And our meters are in alleys and backyards, and when we knock on the door and no one answers, we have to climb fences, deal with Rottweilers, snakes, and people with guns. Numerous hazards. This was just another typical day in the life of a meter reader. He had to walk through tall grass, not knowing where he's going, deal with deadly poisonous snakes, numerous biohazards along the route. Manual meter reading is one of the most deadliest jobs in the US. Robbery, shooting, snipers, dogs, electric fences, guns, you name it. Laborious back injuries, trips, falls, transcription errors, high operations and maintenance costs. It's just a one-shot deal. You show up every month and read the meter. If it's stopped, you have to estimate it. If you cannot access it, you have to estimate it. If people encounter you with a loaded gun, you have to estimate it. And you cannot figure out what happened in the last 30 days because there's no consumption history. And if people steal water, you have to just hope they don't do it in the future. No wonder if someone does a Googling for the characteristics of a meter reader job, I don't think they would take it. Therefore, those who take it leave it shortly thereafter. Here's a picture of a high-tech automatic water meter. It looks almost the same like a manual meter, but there are some intelligence features devised inside this glass case. One of them is the radio, the antenna, the batteries, and of course the impeller is common for a manual as well as automatic meter. The impeller rolls, moves, turns when the water flows through it, and then it conveys this information on water consumption to the radio. The radio communicates to the antenna, and the antenna, which is the last piece in this little box radio station in each customer's house, communicates the consumption reading as the meter truck rolls by and collects and receives the radio frequency consumption reading from the meter box, which we now call the radio station, and it goes right into the laptop, into the database, and it is communicated to the billing department. So the customer is charged for consumption data that is obtained securely and remotely with no transcription errors. We have used radio frequency for the last 117 years. Now it is used 24/7, and we have come to the point where we cannot handle it without radio frequency. Anywhere from AM to FM radio broadcast, cell phones, GPS receivers, wireless internet access, microwave ovens. It's intimately acquainted with our everyday life. If radio frequency is so reliable, why not use it for automatic meter reading? We can avoid putting our meter readers at risk. Here's a truck rolling by collecting automated meter readings. You see the meter in the box. You see the laptop in the truck. The meter has an inherent antenna built into the glass case. The laptop is connected by wire to an external antenna mounted on the truck. Those two antennas, the one on the truck and the one in the meter box, in the meter glass case, communicate with each other. Consumption data is transmitted securely and remotely, and from the truck, from the laptop, to the database and on to the billing department to bill the customer. And then you also have information on leaks, sprinklers, extensive usage, so the customer know what he's facing to promote water conservation and remote secure data acquisition. Now the leaks are not done on a routine basis because they require the truck to stop by for a few minutes and do data logging. So that is only done when there are numerous disputes and it cannot be resolved by the normal process. At that point we depute a truck to the property to see what has been happening for the last 1 month because of numerous disputes. And then we notify the customer that maybe a swimming pool was filled, or there's been numerous occasions of sprinklers going on when there was no need for so much water consumption, or there was a water theft. And this information is very valuable to the customer, and we will go into that information after a few more slides. Here are some of the benefits of transitioning from manual meter reading, which is laborious, to automated meter reading by radio frequency. We have seen instances where it took us a week to collect the water consumption data on the monthly read cycle, and we could collect it with automated meter reading with a roll-by truck and radio frequency meters in just a few hours. So manual meter reading for days now gets replaced by automated, streamlined meter data consumption acquisition within a couple of hours. It's secure, quick, reliable, painless, and safe. Less disputes as the automated meter reading process goes on, and it really facilitates high bill investigations, because now you have 1 hour history stored for about 5.5 months, and you can go back, data log, and see what's going on. We had this is more like our wish list. We had many items in our wish list, but as we went along with the process, and let me describe to you the process that we had. The process that we went through involved a tabletop analysis. Then we invited vendors to give a presentation on their technologies. Based on the initial presentation, we did some tabletop analysis, we did some research. Our finance director, Ed Tossig, did some return on investment calculations, as well as checked out the stability, financial stability of the firms, and many details and calculations went into this exercise, and we looked at the technology, the limitations, and based on what we could assess from Google and tabletop analysis and references, we pared it down to probably 3 or 4 vendors or technologies, and then went to the field, went and met customers, did a complete demo. It was more like a stress test in Louisiana, Texas, and also in Oklahoma. Talked to some utility directors to find out which technology is vandal deterrent and which technology can read submerge. I will discuss about the submerge reading later on in this presentation, but one of the big features we required is the absence of a wire connection. Whenever there's a wire, the customer sees something different, and some customers decide to open up their toolbox and cut the wire and get some free water. Most of our customers are dedicated, but some try to use some loopholes. So we didn't want any wire. We want the new AMR meter to look exactly like the existing meter, so the customer doesn't see any difference. We also wanted it to be reading under submerged conditions, because in most of situations in Texas, the rain is fast, furious, and the meter box gets filled up with water. And when the meter is submerged, we wanted to make sure that if that is the date of the meter reading and the truck drives by with the antenna, we wanted the consumption to propagate. We wanted a one-piece integrated unit and no 3 or 4 pieces being hooked up. We were open to having a fixed network. A fixed network is when you have maybe 250 to 300 power poles, antenna poles, maybe 200 to 300 feet tall, all over Texas. But in a mobile AMR, the truck drives by. The problem with fixed network for our application, even though the technology is good, we were concerned about having $200,000 computers and sophisticated equipment right below the tower in neighborhoods all across Texas, and finding out that they got stolen. Barbed wire fences and 24-hour security. There are about 4 technologies that we evaluated. AMI, the 4th one, is that fixed network. Either you could have data transmitted one way from the meter box, which is now a radio station, to the tower, and then go to Houston, where our meter reading department is, or you can communicate two-way to the meter box to either shut off the meter or shut off the supply to a trickle so they can still have medication, and also to find out what a meter reading is at any time if a customer questions the radio frequency. But AMI was a little more than an application we needed. It was not a good application for us. And you see the walk-by with handheld and the drive-by with laptop. These 2 technologies, the 1 and 2, walk-by and drive-by, are more in line with the very rural, low-density neighborhood, which is typical of most of our system. The meter reader either walks along the streets or drives by to pick up the signal from the meter transmitter. At the end of the day, the data is transmitted to the billing department from the local field office through Ethernet directly connected to our meter department in Tanner Road at Houston. In this technology, the need for data collection units, expensive units mounted on elevated structures, and the potential for them getting stolen is eliminated. The meter reader carries a handheld or mobile laptop which collects the data from each meter box as he passes each property. We had a lot of evaluation criteria, but as I mentioned, it all pared down to just a few, which was submerged, can it read when it's submerged, and does it have any wires. It's a pretty decent evaluation matrix we developed internally to evaluate vendor technologies, so we can select the best technology for Texas utilities application, Texas-wide. The criteria, as you can see, range from 20-year hardware guarantee, network system warranty, to vandal deterrent design, transmitter strength to overcome background, and user-friendly software. Some of the technologies have a wire connection from the meter to the meter transmitter. We wanted a technology that is vandal deterrent, and there are a few vendors that have an integrated unit without a wire interface. The warranty was an important criteria for us because most of the vendors do not offer a lifetime 20-year warranty. High power transmission, of course, was important for us to overcome the background, but power technologies, while providing an effective signal and offering an advantage in overcoming background from metal meter lids and obstructions or debris, have an inherent disadvantage due to the required FCC license, which goes with the high power requirement, and also the battery drain because of high power. One of our operations managers recalls an instance where they lost an FCC license, leaving the AMR system they purchased stranded. So we wanted to protect our investment. Last but not least, since we were also planning to change the meters, we wanted to make sure that the technology we used was compatible with our water quality. We have noticed that many of the PD meters we had malfunctioned because the silt got in and stopped the meter. We felt that a multi-jet was more compatible to the water quality that we had, because an occasional silt problem wouldn't stop it and would go right through it. So we decided to go with a multi-jet. This objective is pretty clear and lays the groundwork for the direction in which we went. We wanted a very reliable, best technology for the lowest life cycle cost, and we were trying to find one vendor. And here's the process that I mentioned: the tabletop analysis, vendor presentations, field work, meeting with clients, final evaluation. Right here is a slide that shows a meter that is submerged. This, I mentioned, this was one of our main objectives. This is what made us go with the company that we went with. We asked all the vendors that we were listening to and in touch with if their meters can read under submerged conditions, and they said no. But there was one vendor that took up that challenge because they felt that their technology could read under submerged conditions. And I didn't want them just driving and telling me that it did it. I wanted to be in that truck, that mobile truck that picked up that signal and made sure the consumption reading in the meter and the radio frequency consumption read that I received matched. It was in Tiki Island, by the way, pretty close to Sugar Land, Houston, probably a 1-hour drive. And here's a meter just a day after the rainstorm that's almost completely submerged. You can see the consumption reading that's 8,980. Now I was sitting in the truck. As you can see, here's that 8,980. It was at 10:40 a.m. and everything else was okay. And I was convinced that 100 feet away, sitting in a truck, I could receive this consumption reading. Investigate how this technology could provide leak detection information to customers. If there's a high dispute bill that we cannot resolve, we can't do it on a normal routine, but if there's a dispute and we can't reconcile it through tabletop analysis and previous bill investigation, then we have to do a thing called a data logging. We stop the truck next to the meter box and extract consumption readings for the last few months. In this case, this lady was out of town for a few months and couldn't believe how high her bill was. And so we actually did a data logging during this exercise, and as you can see right here, the consumption reading is flowed, and then a leak starts right here. The leak keeps progressing. The sprinklers keep coming on. And here's a leak in progress. It attained equilibrium, the sprinklers, and then the leak progressing. In this case, it could mean a big difference for the consumer. The consumer may end up paying $600 a month if the dispute cannot be resolved. But with the data logging, with this technology that can read under submerged conditions. And as you can see, the leak went on, the leak was fixed, and you can see that the consumption went down. This was a big advantage. Just before deciding on which technology to use, since every vendor's technology appeared to be equally good until the focus on the history of the consumption being picked up during a drive-by event, which is a monthly event, and the submerged conditions, radio transmission during submerged conditions, got us into focus, making us realize that there was only one vendor that could be a perfect application for our Texas utility system. So we called the vendors that we were evaluating, and we asked them to get us the best meter they had on the shelf. And we went to Dallas, and one of the city labs that had an AWWA test bench was willing to test all these meters side by side. So we put the meters side by side and tested them. We took a few off because they were in conflict, but overall, based on the side by side testing and some independent testings we did, we were able to see which meter was giving us the best performance and which meter was not giving us the performance we expected. At this point, we were ready to make a decision. We had done the stress test, which was to see not the regular normal test, but the stress test in typical conditions that we face daily to make sure. Stress test number 1, can the meter perform under submerged condition? Stress test number 2, can it provide consumption history, where we can get history for a few months to try to help customers if they were getting high bills and the dispute led to investigation and we were able to find a leak, and also to confirm that the leak was fixed. And stress test number 3 was testing all the meters side by side on an AWWA test bench, which was done at the high flow of 10 GPM, medium flow of 2 GPM, and the low flow. We awarded the project to a firm, and the installation started. A few weeks through the installation, I visited one of the sites, and I found out that this project was headed for disaster. We were planning to complete the project in 6 months because we had to install a new system called SAP. However, as you can notice in the beginning, the contractor efficiency index, which was one of the indexes my colleague Sean Sharkey had coined, was pretty close to 20%. This is when people were getting up at 10 o'clock in the morning and there was no project manager, the vendor's project manager, overseeing them and seeing what was happening. So we had to hire a second contractor. We had to do things in-house, and pretty soon, with all the people power that we had, the efficiency index went up pretty close to 100%, and we were able to finish the project in 6 months. This was a very good analytical tool. It's a tool in which you're not accusing your colleague or your project manager. Pretty much you give them an analytical tool and tell them, the way it's going, I think this project will take 10 years, and people will take a look at it and make some changes. This one shows at any day how many meters have to be installed and how the average has to be increased. The average had to be increased to a very high number, over nearly 250 meters a day, to catch up. And then as we started catching up, and the red line is the running average meters installed per day, and as we started increasing the number of meters we were installing every day to catch up with the required number of meters installed every day to make sure our project is completed in 6 months, our contractor efficiency index increased. We were steadily completing the project to meet expectations, and the project was completed in 6 months, which is unprecedented. We did some checks to find out if anyone had installed a project of this magnitude all across Texas landscape, and we found out this was the first. I'd like to add some acknowledgments to Chuck Profile, the Vice President and Managing Director, whom I should give credit for coming up with this concept and vision in the long term to install automatic meter reading. Ed Tosick, our Finance Director, Ryan Quigley, the Director of Operations, who was indeed the project manager for the field installation, Gary Rose for this operations for the central region, Doug Connor, who was the one that took meters apart to give me feedback that some of the PD meters were getting clogged up with silt, and so we have to go to multi-jet. David Garrett was the information technology project manager, and he was very helpful in the evaluation, analyzing, and finding out which meter would be the best and how we could apply it to our system, the existing as well as the transition and the new. George Freitag was the one who encouraged me to go ahead and submit a paper. Sean Sharkey was the one who coined the contractor efficiency index, and Janice Hayes was our community relations manager post-installation and transition, dealing with the customers. And it was an excellent team effort, and I'd like to thank all of my colleagues and my supervisor, Chuck Profili, for the outstanding job the team was able to accomplish. Next question. What was your experience on operations and maintenance after you installed this new automatic meter reading system? We had 2,500 meters installed in one system, and 25 of them failed because of moisture intrusion inside the dial of the meter, and we had to send it back to the firm, and it was all honored under the warranty that we had in place. So just the time was accessing the meter pit, those 25 meters, and taking them off and sending them off to the vendor. And another system, we had about 5,000 installed, and I recall about 40 of them had moisture intrusion, same problem. All of them had to be shipped back. But then if you look at the failure rate, it's about 1%, and based on my evaluation, the failure rate with other technologies for an application similar to Texas Utilities, or I would say for Texas Utilities, would be pretty close to 10%. The 1% failure rate is much lower compared to the 10%, and it's really an outlier in the lower realm. So I would say that yes, we do have some operations and maintenance issues, but those are what we anticipated before we signed on to this technology. We checked with some other offices that had installed the same technology, and they were also pretty close to 1%. So we were ready for a 1% failure rate in our operations and maintenance, but not for a 10%, which is one of the reasons we chose this technology compared to other technologies which appear to have pretty close to a 10% failure rate, which would have been an unacceptable criteria for our Texas Utilities. The next question relating to tamper. How easy is it to tamper with a radio frequency automatic meter? Very easy. They could put a magnet and stop the consumption reading. However, a month later, when we come to do the meter reading, a tamper alert is broadcasted to our mobile laptop, and once we get the tamper alert, we carry out an investigation, and if we find out that a magnet has been placed, we do contact the customer to educate them so it doesn't happen again. And we strongly discourage this because tampering with the water system is a federal offense, and it's not something that is dealt with in the small sense. There are serious consequences, and we do educate the customer so it doesn't happen again. So that's all the questions we have, and thank you for your time and attention, and you all have a good day.